Hey crafty people, welcome back to my channel, and in case you're new here, I'm Sarah, also known as Craft Nerd because I'm a nerd who loves to craft. I do paper crafting, card making, junk journaling, and mixed media art. Let's get crafting! Oh, welcome to my channel. In case you're new, for the year 2026, each month I'm picking a craft supply and focusing on different ways to use it in your crafting. So for the month of April, I'm focusing on stamps, and I decided for this video what we're gonna do is see how many different looks we can get using the exact same stamp. So for this, I've pulled out Tim Holtz and Stampers Anonymous's Floral Trims CMS 461. And I am going to show you a bunch of different ways to use this stamp to get different looks in your projects. I pulled out my Misty so that I can stamp in the same spot over and over again. And the paper I've grabbed is Artist Loft Mixed Media Pad. I have not put it through its paces fully yet, but it's 98 pounds or 160 GSM. And it should hold up to some wet techniques, which is what we're going to do. And it's on the smoother side. If you've been watching my channel for a while, you know I tend to use, for my crafty stamping, Canson XL watercolor paper. That has a smooth and a rough side. Since we're stamping, I wanted something a little smoother, and I really want to give this paper more of a workout to see how I like it. And I am going to grab... For this round, we're going to stamp it with VersaFine. You could also use StazOn or archival ink, just not a dye-based ink, because what we're going to do is color this with watercolors. And I'm actually going to show you a couple different techniques for watercoloring in a stamped image, which should get us some different looks. That is pretty good. You tend not to get a fully perfect image because this still has a little bit more texture than like a smooth cardstock designed for stamping. So I'm going to stamp it a couple times because I got a couple different ways you can watercolor depending on what products you have, and to some extent what look you're going for. Actually, I do want to do one where I'm going to ink it with VersaFine Olympia Green, just to show you you don't always have to use black for your stamping and what you can get if you switch up your ink. Let me clean off my stamp. I'm going to set this aside. I'm going to leave this in here because since I put the pieces of paper all the way in the corner, I think on one of these, the technique I'm going to do, I may want to restamp. So we're going to set that aside for now. I'm going to pull out for this first one, and this is the green versus the black. It's a very dark green, but you can still kind of tell a difference. Let me show you up close. See if you can see better. There is a difference. It's very subtle because it is a dark green, but that's one of those things. Don't forget, you can always pull out a color ink and stamp with that instead of black. For this first one, I am going to grab my Distress watercolor pencils, and we're doing this on, let me write on the back so that we have the information when we look at what we did at the end. We have VersaFine, Olympia Green, Distressing watercolor pencils. Now these guys work a little bit differently than your usual watercolor pencils. So just keep that in mind. I am realizing I don't, oh wait, I do have a cup and I do have water. Okay. And it helps if you pour the water in the cup, not onto your table. It really does work better that way. Now I am probably only going to do some of this on camera because this is a rather large stamp, and if I color everything all on camera, we're going to be here forever. So I'm going to start with the big flower, and I'm coming in with dried marigold. I'm going to put a little ripe persimmon at the base of the petals. Now I'm going to grab a paintbrush. Okay, now I'm going to come in and I'm going to wet the pencil. Now, a tip if you're using the Tim Holtz Distress crayon, watercolor pencils, is if you want to add more color, once you've wet the piece, don't try drawing on it with the crayon, the pencil. Again, the pencil does not like that. So if I want to add some more color somewhere, which I'll show you in a sec, I'm going to take my brush to the back end of the pencil. Because that's another thing. Once you get the tip wet, coloring like the other flowers in, it would not like that. Come in, I got a little over the line over here, and just scrub it out with a clean brush. Say, for example, I want a little bit more dried marigold up on the tips of those leaves. I can come in, wet the back end, because if I'm going to color the rest of them, I don't want to touch the wet brush to the tip. And I can come in and add a little bit more to the back. Now for the leaves, I'm going to come in and grab, still don't know these pencils well enough, so it becomes kind of a, which color should I try using? Let's go a little crushed olive as my base color. Thinking some peeled paint for the veins. Coming in with a dry paintbrush to sop up some of that excess moisture that was on there. Uh-oh. Dripped a little water over there. Definitely think I'm going to bring a little more peeled paint in. I'm toying with adding a little bit of forest moss. I think I'm going to add just a hint of forest moss to these guys. All right, so there's our first watercoloring technique. I'll color the rest of this off camera so you can see how it looks when it's completely done. And actually, let's grab our heat tool and just give it a good dry. And actually, before we're done, I do want to come in and add a little yellow for the center of the flower. And let's go with mustard seed. right, I'm gonna set that aside and I am gonna grab, say you don't have the Distress watercolor pencils, but you do have Distress ink pads. You can grab a block. We'll use this block and a couple ink pads. Let's go with Shaded Lilac, some Wilted Violet, and some Villainous Potion for our flowers this time around. I'm going to start with my lightest color. I'm just going to put some on the block, which you of course can't see it because it's translucent. So let's put a piece of paper underneath so you can see. I'm going to give it a little spritz with some water. And now I'm going to paint with it. And a little bit Wilted Violet. And just a little bit of Villainous Potion to get some darker bits in a few spots. Shaded Lilac. Alright, let's grab some greens. Figured I'd pull out the same colors we used for the leaves using the pencils so we can see how different of a result you get switching between Distress inks and Distress watercolor pencils. So I'm going to start with the crushed olive. Let's dry that just to make sure I don't have them bleeding into each other. Okay, I'm gonna set this one aside. Oh, nope, yellow in the center. Let me grab some yellow. Grabbed mustard seed. All right, let's set this one aside. You can also watercolor with Distress Mica stains, and I just realized that I think I was pulled out, and hopefully it wasn't for everything. So I've grabbed Tart Cranberry and Yuletide for reds. So I'm just gonna spritz a little bit onto my block. Which is the darker of the two? That's the darker. Okay. And this is going to give us a completely different look. And I forgot to grab a yellow for the center, which is what I've been using for the centers. Now, the mica spray stains are a combination of a colored liquid with a coordinating mica in it. The mica is opaque, whereas the color is translucent. So depending on how thick you put it on is going to determine how translucent your results are. So the thicker you go, the more mica you're going to have, and the more opaque it's going to be. I think I got a little heavy-handed with the liquid because it is bleeding everywhere, because since it is in a liquid, adding a ton of water is going to get it to move a lot. But yeah, that is going everywhere over here. Let's see if we can clean some of this up. But I suspect it's going to be a big struggle because red is generally very stubborn. Yeah, I got way out of hand on this one. All right, let's hit it with some heat so that it stops the moving. All right, this may have been the first time I've actually painted with these guys. So I think you're probably better off not adding too much water since they're already very fluidy, because we're dealing with micas. And yeah, I know I just added more wetness to that, but I kind of want to blend that out a little bit better. Right, I'm gonna hit it with my heat tool again because I want to do the green leaves, and if we're wet, it's gonna make more of a mess over here. For the leaves, I grabbed Tree Lot and Specimen. Let me grab a yellow. We'll do the center real quick. And I've grabbed Flickering Candle. So put a little bit of that out. All right, as with everybody else, I'm gonna go ahead and finish this off camera. And I've got one more watercoloring option for watercoloring these flowers, which I need to grab stuff for, so I'll be back in a bit. Our next watercoloring option is to use watercolor paints, and this is a Fuumuui set, and it's actually semi-opaque, so it's not gonna be as translucent as your normal watercolor set would be, but it's one of those ones I saw it, I was like, ooh, so pretty, I want it, and I've used it like once for a very small project so far, so figured let's pull it out and have a play with it. I'm trying to decide what color I want to go with for our flowers. I think I'm gonna go with the green, or the blues. So there's a blue, gray 1, 2, and 3, and I'm gonna spritz them with a little water to activate them. Try that, and we'll do some leaves, and then I'll do the rest off camera. I'm gonna go ahead and finish painting the rest of this, and then I'll be back. Since the watercolor on this, which I finished coloring it, is semi-opaque, and we kept our piece in the Misty, we can go back and restamp to bring back out the darks of the stamped image. So let me grab my VersaFine Clair Nocturne, ink up the stamp, and stamp it again. And see, now our image is more vibrant again. So that's something to keep in mind. If you have a stamp positioning tool, you can restamp it after you've colored it. Okay, so our next one that we're going to color, we're going to do Copic Markers, which are going to give us a completely different look from our watercolor ones. So I've grabbed for the flowers RV10, RV13, and RV43. The RV10. Now I'm going to go with my darker color. It's looking like it might be darker than the 47. All right. I'm going to go back in and grab the 47 here in a sec and blend out. Do some Y15, and then for the leaves I'm going to do YG03, YG01, and YG17. And again, I start with my lightest color, go in, add in my darkest, and then blend with the medium, and sometimes then again the lightest color. To darken some of the shadowy areas on the flower, I've grabbed a C1. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and finish coloring this, and then I've got 2 more coloring techniques to show you, and I'll be back. So next up, we are going to color with colored pencils on craft. And the key to this technique is having a white colored pencil to use for blending. What we're going to do is come in and use the white to blend. Just realizing I actually pulled the stamp out of my Misty, and I'm going to want to restamp this, and we're not going to be able to because I'm not going to be able to get it to line up correctly. Yikes. And I think it's working better going white first and then on top. I have done it where I've used the white to blend, but I think I've used it with brighter colors. All right, I am gonna go through and color the rest of this, and once I'm done, I'll be back. And our last coloring technique is gonna be to use chalk. And I've stamped the image on a piece of Arteza watercolor paper, so there's a little bit of texture to grab the chalk. And I'm just gonna use my chalk to color in the flowers. Alright, so I'm gonna finish coloring this and then I'll be back, and I think we'll be looking at everything we got done. Okay, so I started editing this video, realized it was way too long, and so I've decided to cut it into two parts. So part one, we're gonna end with here where we've done a variety of ways of coloring your image to get different looks. So let's go through what we did. So we started with a bunch of watercolor techniques. So we watercolored with Distress watercolor crayons. Probably should have stamped that one again to bring the stamping forward. We watercolored with Distress inks. We watercolored with Distress Mica spray stains, and I'm just now realizing I did not color that branch, the stem part of that. And this is giving very Christmassy vibes. Like, it's amazing how different of a look you get depending on what colors you use and what mediums. And then we watercolored with semi-opaque watercolors. And this one I did stamp over again to bring the crispness of the image back out. Then we did coloring our image with Copic Markers, which gives you a much more vibrant look than, say, the watercolor pencils or Distress inks or watercolors, although the Micas, of course, because they're shimmer, which I don't know how well that's showing up, but you get nice little shimmery shine on it. The Copics are a brighter medium, so you've got a brighter image. Then we colored with colored pencils on craft cardstock. And on this one, I did, after I was done coloring, because it had knocked back the lines so much, I went in with a Copic multi-liner and redrew, because I had already taken the stamp out of my Misty and realized too late that I should not have done that. And then we've got the one we colored with chalk, which I do need to spray with a fixative because chalk will rub off after you put it on. And I'm trying to think, I don't know if I told you, I stamped this with a Memento ink because you can't use a pigment ink if you're coloring with Copic markers. Everything else was stamped with either VersaFine or VersaFine Clair, which is a pigment ink and is permanent. Which you definitely want to do that if you're doing a watercolor technique and not use a dye-based ink like Memento, because then your ink's going to smudge when you watercolor. There was one more thing I wanted to show you as to how you can get a different look from a stamp like this, and that's cutting out individual elements. So I did do another one that I watercolored with my positively saturated inks and then cut apart pieces of the image. And I was just playing around with them. And so that gives a totally different look from, say, the image just as stamped. You could also do a single element and maybe put a sentiment across here. Let me see if I've got something handy I could just use for demonstration. So you could do something like where you've got a sentiment here and the flower just coming out of the sentiment, or you could do just this single flower, or this flower all on its own, or again, experiment with clustering. Like this is how it cut out. Was that it? No. How does this go? This goes like that. This one goes like this, so that's how they went together originally, was like so. So you could even piece it back together, kind of along the lines of how it is on the stamp, just with editing out some of the florals. But that is another thing to keep in mind. You don't have to keep it intact as one piece. So let's bring it back over all of our colored images. So I hope this has inspired you to take another look at a stamp set you use, you know, in the same way over and over again, because I certainly fall victim to that often, is that I have the set way that I color something. You know, my default tends to be to color with Copic markers, and look at the huge variety of looks you can get by just varying what medium you use to color your images. And don't forget, you can always cut apart and just use part of the image. You don't have to use the whole thing. So that's all for today. If you enjoyed this video, please do all the things that lets YouTube know you enjoyed the video. Like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, leave me a comment down below. Thanks for joining me, and happy crafting.